You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. Hi, welcome to the Forsaken Joe channel. I'm going to tell you a story that's been eating me alive for weeks, and honestly, I don't even know how to start without my hands shaking. All I know is that for 10 years, I was living in a world that I thought I understood, until one week shattered everything I believed about my marriage. For 10 years, my wife's answer to almost everything was no. No to adventures, no to change, no to anything that might have brought us closer. And I accepted it. I told myself that's just how love works. You take what you can get and hold on to it like a fool. But then, 1 week ago, she said yes, not to me, to someone else. Twice. And the way she smiled when she came home, God, that smirk, made me feel like I'd been invisible all these years. Last Thursday, she walked into the house late, wearing that perfume she saves for special occasions. She didn't even notice me sitting in the dark on the couch. She just walked by, humming. She hasn't hummed around me in years, and I just sat there, frozen, wondering who she had become, and when I stopped being the man she smiled at. I tried to ask her, gently at first, "How was your night?" She looked at me with this amused expression, like I was a child asking a stupid question, and said, "Fine, just out." Then she laughed to herself as she scrolled through her phone. That laugh, I swear I felt my blood boil. The next day I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that confirmed every dark thought I'd been having. And it's not just the betrayal that's killing me, it's how effortlessly she hid it, how easily she slipped out of the life we built, like it meant nothing to her. The day after I felt that shift in Eloise, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just in a better mood. Maybe that smile wasn't for someone else. But then came Friday night. I don't even know how to put this into words without sounding like some desperate fool, but I guess that's exactly what I am. She told me she'd be working late. That wasn't unusual. Her job had always been her excuse to stay away from home. I tried not to think about it, but around 11 p.m., I couldn't sleep. Something in my gut told me to check. I know how pathetic it sounds, sitting there, phone in hand, refreshing her location like a lost puppy. But that's what I did, and guess what? She wasn't anywhere near her office. My wife, my Eloise, was parked near some small bar on the other side of town, a bar I've never even heard of. I waited. I waited for her to come home like a good little husband, but when she walked through that door at 1 a.m., she didn't even look guilty. She smiled at me, smirked, and said, "Why are you still awake?" Like I was the one doing something wrong. My throat tightened, but all I could say was, just couldn't sleep. She walked past me, humming again, that same tune, and my chest burned. I wanted to scream, to grab her phone and demand answers, but instead, I just sat there. I sat there like an idiot, listening to the sound of her in the shower, my mind spinning like a storm. Who was she humming for? Who was making her laugh like that again? The next morning, I broke the one rule I'd always sworn I'd never break. I went through her phone. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know. Most of her texts were clean, almost too clean, but then I found something. Not a message, not even a name, but a picture. It wasn't inappropriate or anything like that. It was worse. It was a picture of her smiling in a way I haven't seen in years, with a glass of wine, sitting at that bar. And in the reflection of the window behind her, I could see someone's hand, a man's hand, reaching across the table to hers. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. She said no to me for 10 years, to every kiss that lingered too long, to every attempt to bring back that fire. And now, suddenly she was smiling like that for someone else? That night, I tried to bring it up casually. "Did you have fun last night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't even look up from her phone. "It was fine," she said, her lips curling just slightly like she was holding back a private joke. A joke I wasn't part of. And that's when it hit me. Maybe I never was part of her world. Maybe I was just the background, the safe option, while she waited for something better. Something else. I spent that entire weekend walking around like a ghost in my own house. Every corner of the place we called ours felt like it was mocking me. The kitchen table where we used to eat dinner together now felt like a crime scene. The living room couch, where she once curled up next to me during late-night movies, now seemed like a stranger's furniture. Every glance she threw at me, or worse, didn't throw at me, was like a dagger, and the silence between us, it was deafening. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it, that maybe I was just insecure, but that picture, that hand, it wouldn't leave my head. I could barely eat. I could barely sleep. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing next to me, and wondering who she really was when she wasn't with me. I swear at one point I caught her smiling in her sleep. Smiling. And I wanted to shake her awake and scream, "Who are you smiling for?" But I didn't. I just lay there like a coward, my fists clenched, feeling like my heart was about to burst out of my chest. On Sunday, I cracked. I asked her outright, "Who have you been spending time with?" My voice was trembling, but I needed to know. She didn't even flinch. She just raised her eyebrow and said, "What's with the interrogation, Leonard? I'm not on trial." Then she laughed, and walked away, leaving me there like I was some pathetic joke. And you know what? Maybe I am, because I couldn't even follow her, couldn't even force her to give me an answer. I just stood there, feeling smaller than I've ever felt in my life. That night, I did something desperate. I followed her. She said she was going to meet an old friend for a quick drink, and I, like the sad, broken man I've become, grabbed my keys and trailed her car from a distance. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. She didn't go to the office. She didn't go to any place I recognized. She went back to that bar, that same bar from the photo. I parked across the street, sitting there like some creep, watching through the window as she walked in, her posture confident, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then I saw him. Some guy, maybe mid-30s, leaning forward with that kind of smile that says, "I already know I've got you." He touched her hand, my wife's hand, across the table, and she didn't pull away. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She looked happy. I wanted to burst in there, to flip the table, to scream at both of them, but I didn't. I just sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, feeling like the weakest man alive. When she came home later that night, she kissed me on the cheek, like everything was normal, like she hadn't just carved my soul into pieces. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. All I could think about was how for 10 years she said no. No to me, no to us. And now, suddenly, someone else got the yes that I'd been begging for. But I'm not done. I can't just sit here and let this destroy me. I need answers. I need to know how deep this goes, even if the truth ruins me. The following days felt like a blur, but not the kind of blur that numbs you. It was the kind that grinds you down slowly, like a constant storm tearing at your sanity. Every time I looked at Eloise, I felt like I was staring at a stranger wearing my wife's face. I watched her pour her morning coffee, scroll through her phone, laugh at something I wasn't part of, and all I could think about was that man's hand brushing against hers in that bar. By Wednesday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I started paying attention to everything, every detail I used to overlook. I noticed the subtle shift in her wardrobe. She used to throw on simple jeans and sweaters for work, but now there were dresses. Soft, silky dresses I hadn't seen her wear in years. She was taking longer in front of the mirror, touching her hair like she was rehearsing for someone's eyes. Not mine, never mine. That night, I tried to talk to her again, to get something, anything that could explain this. "Eloise," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could, "is there something going on? Something you're not telling me?" She didn't even hesitate. She just looked up from her phone with this cool expression and said, "Leonard, I don't have time for your paranoia." And then she turned back to her screen. Just like that. As if I wasn't worth even a second of her attention. But here's the thing about me. I may be weak, but I'm stubborn. I decided if she wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. That Friday, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day going through her laptop while she was out. I felt disgusting, like some cheap detective rifling through my own life. Most of her files were boring. Emails, work documents, but then I found a folder buried deep in her photos. It was labeled simply MISC. My heart raced as I clicked it open. The pictures were innocent enough at first. Random selfies, work events. But then I saw them. New photos, recent ones. Eloise, dressed up, smiling in a way I didn't recognize anymore. And then I saw a reflection again. The same bar. The same man's hand. But this time, there was a face. Not fully visible, but enough to see the smirk on his lips as he leaned in close to her. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the screen, my mind screaming. She looked so happy, happier than I'd seen her in years, and that killed me more than anything. She never smiled at me like that anymore. She never laughed like that with me. For 10 years, she made me feel like I was asking for too much just by wanting her attention. And here she was, giving it all away so effortlessly. I couldn't take it. I closed the laptop and sat there for hours, waiting for her to come home. When she walked through the door, I tried to read her face, to find any sign of guilt. But there was nothing. Just that same quiet confidence. That same subtle smirk that made me feel like I was losing my mind. I didn't say a word that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust what would come out of my mouth. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she even noticed the distance between us anymore, or if she cared. I woke up Saturday morning with a feeling I can't even describe, like a mix of rage, fear, and this pathetic sense of desperation clawing at my throat. I couldn't just sit there anymore, waiting for her to drop crumbs of affection while secretly giving everything to someone else. I needed to know who he was, this man who'd somehow woken something in her that I thought was long gone. I couldn't stop replaying the image of his hand reaching across the table, his smirk half visible in that reflection. My wife, my Eloise, looked like she was glowing with life, and all I could think about was how I'd been the fool feeding her love for years while she starved me of even basic attention. I couldn't keep guessing. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I drove back to that bar, the same one where I saw them together. It was mid-afternoon, the place mostly empty except for a few regulars. I sat there with a beer I didn't even want, just watching, waiting, my heart pounding like I was about to jump out of my own skin. I didn't even know if he'd show up, but I knew that if I saw him, I'd recognize that smug face in an instant. An hour passed. Nothing. 2 hours. My head was spinning, and I was about to give up when a man walked in. He wasn't flashy, not someone you'd immediately notice, but I knew. Something in me just knew. He had that relaxed confidence, the kind of presence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. He nodded to the bartender like he'd been here 100 times, like this was his territory. And then he sat down at the same booth I'd seen in that picture. I can't explain the way my blood boiled just looking at him. I wanted to storm over there, demand answers. But I also felt this weird, paralyzing fear. What if I was wrong? What if Eloise would laugh in my face and call me paranoid again? What if this guy had no idea who I even was? I just sat there, my mind spinning, watching every move he made. Then, like clockwork, Eloise walked in. My heart stopped. She hadn't told me she was going out today. She hadn't said a word. And when she saw him, her whole face lit up in that way I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't just a smile. It was a look that screamed, "I'm alive when I'm with you." I wanted to get up, to scream, to rip apart the lies right there, but I didn't. I stayed seated, gripping my glass so hard I thought it might shatter. I listened as they laughed softly, too close, too comfortable. At one point, she reached across the table and touched his hand. My stomach turned. She hadn't done that to me in years. Years. I left the bar before they saw me, my head pounding like I'd been hit. I drove aimlessly for hours, the anger building in me like a storm I couldn't control. Who was this man? Was he her coworker? Someone she'd been hiding all along? I couldn't keep living in this limbo, knowing that my wife was giving her yes to someone else while I drowned in her silence. That night, I confronted her, or at least I tried to. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at her while she washed a glass, and I asked, "Who is he?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She turned slowly, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes, surprise, maybe, or a flicker of guilt. But then it was gone. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said flatly. And then she walked away, leaving me standing there like a fool. I know I can't let this go. Not now. Not when I've seen the way she looks at him. I need to know everything, even if the truth destroys me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Eloise was beside me, calm, breathing evenly, as if her world was perfectly in order while mine was collapsing piece by piece. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind racing with every possible scenario. Who was this man? How long had it been going on? And why did she look so alive with him, while I'd spent years trying to bring back even a fraction of that smile? By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to hand me the truth. I was going to drag it out of the shadows myself. I took a personal day from work and stayed home, pretending I was too tired to go in. I watched her get ready, taking extra care with her hair and makeup, slipping into one of those soft dresses she hadn't worn for me in years. I felt a mix of nausea and anger twisting inside me as I asked casually, "Where are you headed today?" She barely looked up from her phone. "Just the office. Big meeting," she said, like it was nothing. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and walked out the door, leaving me standing there with my teeth clenched. 10 minutes later, I grabbed my keys and followed her car. I stayed a few cars back, careful not to get too close. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest as I watched her turn left. Not toward her office, but toward the other side of town. I knew where she was going. I knew it in my gut. Sure enough, she pulled into the same bar's parking lot, casually checking her phone before walking inside with that same quiet confidence that had become a stranger to me. I parked far enough away not to be seen and waited, every second stretching into eternity. A few minutes later, he arrived. The man. I finally got a clear look at him as he stepped out of his car. He wasn't particularly tall or even particularly handsome, but there was something about him, an ease, a sense of self-assurance that burned me to my core. This guy didn't have to try. He just existed. And that was enough to win her smile. Watching them together from a distance was like ripping out my own heart and stomping on it. They sat in the same booth, leaning close, laughing over something I'd never be allowed to know. At one point, she touched his arm lightly, the kind of touch that spoke of a secret world they shared, one that I had no key to enter. I wanted to walk in there, to confront them both, but instead I just sat in my car, shaking with fury and heartbreak. When she left, I didn't go home. I followed him. I tailed his car across town, through quiet streets, until he pulled up to an upscale apartment complex. I memorized the address like my life depended on it. Sitting there, watching him disappear into that building, I felt something inside me crack. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an outsider, peering into a life my wife had willingly built without me. That evening, Eloise came home as if nothing had happened. She smiled faintly, asked me how my day was, and started cooking dinner. I couldn't even eat. I sat there at the table, staring at her, wondering who she was really thinking about as she chopped vegetables and hummed that soft little tune again. And here's the thing that scared me most. I realized I didn't even know if I wanted to confront her anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to hear the truth. Because the truth meant admitting that the woman I'd loved for a decade had already left me long before I noticed. By the time Monday rolled around, I was a mess. I hadn't shaved in days, my eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and I'd been pacing the house like a caged animal. I couldn't keep doing this to myself, watching her smile for someone else while I drowned in my own silence. So I decided I was going to confront her, and if I didn't get the truth, I would go straight to him. My hands were trembling as I sat in the kitchen that morning, watching her pour herself coffee like it was just another day in our picture-perfect life. She glanced at me and said, "You look awful, Leonard. Didn't sleep again?" There wasn't even a hint of concern in her voice. It was almost mocking, like she knew I was crumbling and enjoyed watching me fall apart. Something inside me snapped. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut the air between us. She froze for half a second before turning around, that same cool expression on her face. "What are you talking about now?" she said, as if I was some paranoid stranger. I pushed forward. "The man at the bar. I saw you with him. Twice. So don't stand there and pretend like I'm imagining this." My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. Her lips curled into the faintest smirk, and she said, "Leonard, you're losing it. Maybe you should see someone about these trust issues." Trust issues? That was her answer. She wasn't denying it, not really. She was just twisting it, making me feel like I was the crazy one for noticing what was right in front of me. I wanted to scream, but all I managed was a pathetic, "You've been lying to me, Eloise." "For how long?" She turned away, picking up her coffee like the conversation was over, and said, "I'm not doing this right now." Then she walked out the door, leaving me standing there like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed my keys and followed her again. I told myself this time would be different. This time, I wouldn't just sit there watching like a coward. She went straight to the same bar, met him at that same booth, and the moment I saw his smug face, I felt my blood boil. I got out of my car and walked inside, my legs shaking with every step. They didn't see me at first. He was leaning in close, saying something that made her laugh. This soft, genuine laugh I hadn't heard in years. My heart twisted like a knife. I walked right up to their table, and when they finally noticed me, Eloise's eyes widened, but not with guilt, with annoyance. "Leonard, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low and sharp. I looked at him, this stranger who had stolen the pieces of her I'd been begging for, and said, "Who the hell are you?" He didn't flinch. He just smirked, leaning back in his seat like I was some uninvited guest at his party. "Maybe you should calm down, buddy," he said in this smooth, dismissive tone that made me want to hit him. "Buddy?" I laughed, but it wasn't a sane laugh. It was the sound of a man breaking. "That's my wife you're sitting with." Eloise rolled her eyes like I was embarrassing her. "Leonard, go home," she hissed, but I wasn't going anywhere. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "If she's your wife, maybe you should ask why she's here with me instead of with you." It was like being punched in the gut. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Eloise just stared at me, her face unreadable. Not guilty, not sorry, just blank. I left before I did something I'd regret. I stumbled back to my car and drove for hours, my mind spiraling. When I got home, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just want to know who he was anymore. I needed to know what she'd been telling him about me, about our life, about the marriage I thought we had. I needed to dig deeper. And that's when I made a decision that would change everything. After that confrontation at the bar, I felt like I'd hit rock bottom. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, thinking about every word, every glance, every subtle smirk Eloise had given me over the past few months. My mind was a constant battlefield. Was she leaving me? Had she been living some double life? I knew I couldn't go on like this, spiraling into anger and paranoia. So, on the third morning, I decided to do the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. I asked her to sit down and talk. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the silence so heavy it was like a third person in the room. My hands were shaking as I said, "Eloise, I can't keep doing this. I need to know the truth. Whatever it is, I just need to hear it from you." For a moment, I thought she would get up and leave, like she always did when things got uncomfortable. But instead, she sighed, set her phone down, and looked me straight in the eyes. "You want the truth?" she said softly. "Then you need to listen." And that's when everything I believed about the past few months turned on its head. The man at the bar, he wasn't some secret lover. He was an old friend from college, a guy who'd just gone through a divorce and needed someone to talk to. She admitted she'd kept it from me because she thought I'd overreact, and she wasn't wrong. I had been spiraling without asking the right questions. The smiles, the laughter, the late nights, they weren't about romance. They were about her remembering who she was before life became a routine. I sat there, stunned, as she continued, "Leonard, I've felt like I've been disappearing in this marriage, like we both forgot how to live. He's just a friend, but he made me realize how much I miss us. I miss who we used to be. I don't want someone else. I want you, but I need you to want me back." It was like a weight lifted from my chest and crushed me at the same time. All this time, I thought I was losing her, but in reality, we were both losing each other. I apologized, really apologized for not seeing her, for letting us both drift into this gray space of silence and routine. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, for the first time in years. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Now, a few weeks later, things are different. We've started doing little things again, random late-night drives, dinners where we put our phones away, even silly games like we used to when we first met. I'm not saying everything's magically fixed, but for the first time in years, I feel like we're fighting for each other instead of just existing side by side. So, to everyone watching, I want to ask you this. Have you ever had a moment where you almost lost someone because of assumptions or silence? What did you do to fix it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read your stories. And don't forget to subscribe. You're on Forsaken Joe, where real stories find a voice. If this hit you hard, share your thoughts.